Welcome to another fantastic video with the Haven Investment Group. I'm Tim Macy.
I'm Grant Wilson.
And today we're talking about short-term rentals versus long-term rentals.
Yeah, Tim. So a lot of people have been asking, what does it take to be a short-term rental owner? And what are some of the things we need to think about?
Yeah, and I think it's kind of sexy, right? Like, oh, Airbnb.
Definitely.
They make you look at how much money some of these short-term rentals are generating, and it just looks exciting, you know?
I mean, who hasn't thought that while they were booking their last vacation?
Yeah, they're like, man, I wish I owned this house. I was paying $400 for a weekend or whatever it is. And so, yeah, but there's a lot more that goes into it. And so we're going to dive into some of those details. And I think the first thing to dive into, let's just talk like big overview when it comes to investing, which is, look, you want low risk. It's usually going to be a lower return. You want high risk, more work. It's going to be a higher return. And when we're talking to rental owners about how passive they want to be and what they want to do, you know, like brand new house, stick a tenant in there tends to be the most passive way to do rentals. And then you kind of work your way all the way over to self-managed short-term rental, which is like the most work and highest return. And so it really depends on where you fall in that spectrum.
That's right. Personally, my wife and I self-manage a short-term rental, but we've also got some long-term rentals that are managed by a property manager.
Okay.
So we know the spectrum. Let me tell you, the short-term space, much more effort.
Much more work.
Much more work.
more than the guy in the webinar that says you can get rich with short-term rentals.
That's right. Yeah. If you're willing to respond quickly to booking requests, set up the processes, schedule the cleaning people, and respond to guest emergencies. Hey,
yeah, for sure they happen. And so I mean, I think the big thing is let's dive into the expenses. I don't want to leave out the long-term expenses, right? Because we have a long-term rental, we have expenses. Most of the time the tenant's going to be paying utilities, and they're paying you rent that covers the mortgage. That all sounds great, but actually putting money away for capital expenditures is big, right? Like actually stashing away CapEx, make-ready expenses. Even though you've got great tenants, they left the place clean, there's still a make-ready expense. You still have, if you're having it managed, right, you have a management fee, and then you also have vacancy. And come on, how many people run their rental numbers and don't put anything in for vacancy? They just imagine it's just going to be rented the whole time they own it, and it's just not true. And so on the long-term side, make sure you know those expenses. But I would say those are the major expenses for long-term rentals.
Those are the major expenses. And on the short-term side, you're going to be paying all of the utilities, as you would expect.
Which in San Antonio in the middle of the summer, that AC bill can get up there.
That's right. Some other things to think about, you're going to need to be providing Wi-Fi, maybe cable.
Disney Plus.
Yeah. Hulu. You need to furnish the property. You need to, definitely stock it up with different amenities and maybe even things like salt and pepper shakers.
And one of the big things too is because we're doing Furnish finders with our current house. And so like traveling nurses, so not long-term, but shorter term. So like 30 to 60 day to 90 day rentals. And we got to furnish it. And so, you run all your numbers and you're like, oh, great, we could probably cash flow $800 a month, $900 a month. But if you got to spend $5,000 furnishing the house, how long is it going to take to make that up? And so furnishing these things is something you've got to have a budget for. And then you got to go back and say, okay, how long is it going to take me to just make up for all of the furniture I bought? Now, they have some value to them. So you could say, well, when we're done with it, we could sell it. It's not like it's a total expense. You can also depreciate it for your taxes and all sorts of fun stuff. But at the end of the day, furnishing is one of those things that people don't think about much on the long-term, short-term rental side.
And it could very easily add another $5,000 to $10,000 to your outlay.
Yeah.
Another area I see first-time short-term rental investors slipping up is not understanding that you're in the hospitality business.
Yeah.
This is not, I'm a passive landlord. This is, we've got to put on a clean face and a bright smile every day, and we've got to interact with these people.
Yeah.
And we've got to provide an experience, not just a, four walls, roof kind of.
Yeah, when your long-term tenant leaves, they don't leave you a review online that your next future tenants get to see. And that's the big thing. It's like, we were super hosts on Airbnb, and that wasn't easy. Like, we had to provide a 5-star experience every time somebody came in. And if you don't, you're probably not going to have a successful short-term rental.
That's right. Reviews, especially at the beginning, are going to make or break your investment.
Yeah. And so you have to look at it like you've got a house, and you look at the stuff in the area, and you're like, oh man, these houses are doing pretty well rental wise. They're making a bunch of money. Mine should too. You have to think about, well, is it because like those other houses are super cool, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like people have experiences, right? Like, does the other house have a fire pit, and do they just do a great job as a host, and your house is like kind of beat up? Like you have to think about, is the house that I'm looking at doing a short-term rental on going to provide this great experience for somebody when they come stay?
That's right. And so I would say another key difference is just how location specific short-term rental opportunity is.
Yeah.
It is everything. So are you nearby any good attractions?
Yeah, and I think in our market, it's interesting too, because you've got a lot of business conventions that happen downtown. Mm-hmm. And so this is where I like arbitrage, right? I like where numbers make sense. And when you look at what a single family rental gets near downtown compared to what it can generate on an Airbnb, it's like, man, that's a huge difference. We got a short-term rental Airbnb this property. Whereas if you go to like the north side of San Antonio in a good school district, and you look at what it would rent for compared to what it would Airbnb for, you're like, oh, it's not that big of a difference. There's not that big of an opportunity for arbitrage, right? Like a unfair advantage for short-term rental. So you've got near downtown is a good one for that. And then you also have near the Air Force Base, because here in San Antonio, we've got basic training graduation, which happens every weekend. And now we got wiped during COVID because we have a Air Force basic training Airbnb, which we no longer have because COVID canceled basic training graduations, but those are going to come back. And so when you look at property values and single family rental values in that area, they're okay. But there's a unique opportunity there for Airbnb values to be up. And that's what you're looking for. Like when you go into a market and you're like, hey, I want to do a short-term rental, like what are the unique little pockets that offer you an unfair advantage to get a lot more Airbnb income?
That's right. So moving forward, we think that there's a very big opportunity for short-term rental investors due to the fact that COVID just took so many landlords.
People like me, we came off the market.
There's a host shortage, and Airbnb has spoken about this. Right now, we put our Airbnb up 3 months ago, and it's booked solid. So I feel that people entering that space right now are going to see kind of an outsized benefit.
Yeah, San Antonio has, May of 2021? Like San Antonio does have a unique opportunity right now for Airbnb and short-term rental. The other thing we have too, just rentals in general, because we're comparing long-term to short-term. Mm-hmm. I think another thing driving a lot of the long-term rental opportunity is the fact we have a lot of portfolio owners liquidating their portfolio because prices are so high. And so I'm seeing single family rental properties, right? That inventory is going down. Like we have people coming in and they're like, hey, we want to rent for a year before we buy. That's great. We want to rent a house. Like that's also great, but there aren't any. You know what I mean? Like there's just right. Like you think it's hard to find a house to buy. It's even harder to find a house to rent in a lot of ways right now because there's just not a lot of those either. And so, I think there's good opportunities in both the short-term and the long-term rental right now. It just really depends on how much work do you want to put in. Do you want a second job or do you want an investment property?
That's right.
That's the question. So my final thought is, look, I think if you have something inside of you that is wanting to host, right? I mean, that's what we call our Airbnb managers or owners, our hosts. if you love being a host and you want to create a unique experience for people, I think there's a big opportunity in being a short-term rental owner. But if you just want to buy an investment property that's part of your portfolio and it brings you money, I would just stick with probably a long-term rental.
I agree. I definitely wouldn't have bit off this project if my wife hadn't been partnering with me on it.
Yeah,
She's got the hosting gene.
Yeah.
I would have been sticking with long-term rentals had I been doing it myself.
That's another good thing. Like, both our successful short-term rental experience is having our wives involved, because we would not be able to do it on our own.
There you go.
Yeah, short-term versus long-term rentals. Look, if we missed any points, if you've got some thoughts or some questions, we'll love to hear about it in the chat. Drop them in the comments, and yeah.
Thanks for tuning in.
We'll see you on the next one.
All right.